The desperate call crystalline spires of Zephyria Prime trembled as another shockwave rippled through the planet's atmosphere. Captain Vex-High pressed his six-fingered hands against the observation deck of the orbital station, watching helplessly as crimson beams carved through his world's protective shields. The Krellian Dominion had arrived 3 days ago, and already half the planet's surface cities lay in ruins. "Status report," Vex-High commanded, his voice barely steady as he turned to face his bridge crew. The Zephyrian people had known peace. For over 2 millennia, their advanced technology focused on art, science, and peaceful exploration rather than warfare. Navigator Quinter's tentacles flickered with distress patterns as she consulted her displays. 17 major population centers have fallen, Captain. The Krellian fleet has grown to 43 vessels. Our defensive platforms are down to 30% capacity. Chief Engineer Murden, his scaled skin pale with exhaustion, looked up. From his console, "The quantum barriers won't hold much longer. Their plasma cannons are designed specifically to penetrate our shield technology. It's like they studied our defenses for years." Before attacking, Vex-High closed his eyes, remembering the first contact with the Krellians 6 months ago. They had seemed reasonable then, requesting mining rights to the outer asteroid belts, when the Zephyrian Council had politely declined, explaining their cultural prohibition against strip mining. The Krellians had simply nodded and departed. No one had expected them to return with a war fleet. "What about our allies?" Vex-High asked. Though he already knew the answer. Communications Officer Yelmos shook her head sadly. "The Altarian Federation offers humanitarian aid but will not engage in military action. The Centauri League claims neutrality. The Galactic Trade Union fears economic retaliation from the Krellians." The bridge fell silent except for the distant rumble of explosions from the planet below. Through the viewport, Vex-High could see streams of refugee ships fleeing the dying world, their blue drives painting desperate streaks across the star-filled darkness. "Captain," Quinter said suddenly, her voice carrying a note of hope, "I'm detecting something unusual. Long-range sensors are picking up artificial signals from the outer rim. It's not Krellian or any known configuration." Vex-High hurried to the sensor station. The readings showed complex electromagnetic patterns originating from a previously unexplored system. "How long to reach the source with our fastest courier ship?" "Approximately 4 days. But Captain, we don't know if these beings are friendly or hostile." Vex-High looked at the tactical display, showing Krellian forces systematically destroying everything his people had built over centuries. "They can't be worse than what we're facing now. Prepare an emergency beacon. Include our cultural database, our history, and a plea for assistance." "What should we tell them about the Krellians?" Murden asked. "The truth. That we're a peaceful civilization being exterminated by an empire that sees us as nothing more than obstacles to expansion." Vex-High paused, watching another city burn on the planet below. "Tell them we need help, any help." The beacon launched into the void, carrying the desperate hopes of a dying civilization toward unknown stars where something waited. In the darkness, the responsive emergency signal reached the Sol system during the night shift at Titan Station. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Steele was reviewing patrol reports when the quantum communication array lit up with an incoming transmission from deep space. The message was unlike anything in Earth's databases, complex, mathematical, and clearly artificial. "Director Vance," Steele called to his superior, "you need to see this immediately." Director Rebecca Vance, a veteran of humanity's expansion into the outer colonies, hurried to the communications center. She was known throughout the Sol Defense Force for her decisive leadership and unwavering commitment to protecting human interests. "What are we looking at, Marcus?" "Unknown alien transmission, ma'am. The translation algorithms have been working on it for the past hour. It appears to be a distress call." The main screen displayed the decoded message, and Vance felt her blood run cold as she read. The Zephyrians painted a picture of systematic genocide, their peaceful civilization being methodically destroyed by something called the Krellian Dominion. The attached data files showed burning cities, refugee ships under attack, and casualty figures in the millions. "Get me Admiral Cross," Vance ordered. "Priority Alpha." Within minutes, Admiral James Cross appeared on the secure channel from Mars. Command. His weathered face showed the strain of someone who had spent decades preparing humanity for threats that might come from the stars. Rebecca, what's the situation? First contact, Admiral. And it's not what we hoped for. Vance transmitted the Zephyrian files. We're looking at an interstellar genocide in progress. These people are asking for our help. Cross studied the data in silence for several long minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of command. The Zephyrians seemed genuinely peaceful. Their technology is impressive, but clearly designed for scientific advancement rather than warfare. This Krellian dominion represents exactly the kind of threat we've been preparing for. What are your orders, sir? Activate the Third Fleet. I want the UES Prometheus Defiance and Retribution ready for deep space deployment within 18 hours. Colonel Patricia Morgan will command the Marine contingent. We're going to make first contact in the middle of a war zone. Steele looked up from his console. Admiral, the Zephyrians are requesting humanitarian aid and defensive assistance. They don't seem to understand what kind of species they've contacted. Admiral Cross smiled grimly. Then they're about to learn. Humanity doesn't do defensive wars, Lieutenant. We do overwhelming force applied with extreme prejudice against anyone who threatens innocent lives. The mobilization began immediately. The Third Fleet represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Ships designed not for exploration or peaceful contact, but for projecting power across interstellar distances. Each vessel carried enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. Crewed by humans who had trained their entire lives for warfare among the stars. Colonel Morgan, a compact woman with steel-gray eyes and scars from the Martian rebellion, briefed her officers as the fleet prepared to depart. Intelligence suggests the Krellians are a typical expansion-focused empire. They've been conquering weaker species for resources and territory. What they don't know is that they've just made their first real enemy. The fleet departed Sol System in a blaze of fusion fire, carrying with it the combined might of human civilization. Behind them, Earth's factories went into full production mode, preparing for the possibility that this would not be humanity's last interstellar conflict. In the depths of space, the Zephyrians continued their desperate defense, unaware that help was coming from a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning to fight, survive, and win against impossible odds. First contact space around Zephyria Prime had become a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. Captain Vex High stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching the last of the orbital defense platforms die in brilliant explosions. The Krellian fleet had grown to 57 vessels, their dark hulls blotting out the stars as they moved into final attack positions. Quantum distortion detected. Navigator Quitter announced suddenly, her tentacles dancing over the sensor. Controls. Multiple contacts emerging from jump space at coordinates 7-7-Mark-4. Vex High felt his heart sink. More Krellian reinforcements would spell certain doom for his people. But as the new rivals fully materialized, his sensors registered something impossible. These ships were different, sleek, angular, and somehow more predatory than even the Krellian vessels. Unknown fleet. This is Captain Vex High of the Zephyrian Defense Force. He transmitted on all frequencies. Please identify yourselves. The response came in flawless Zephyrian, though the accent was strange, and the voice carried an undertone of barely controlled aggression. Captain Vex High, this is Admiral James Cross of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. Prepare to transmit all tactical data on hostile forces immediately. United Earth. The mysterious signals from the Outer Rim had been from another species entirely, one that called itself human. Vex High quickly transmitted everything they knew about Krellian fleet dispositions, weapon capabilities, and tactical patterns. Understood, came Admiral Cross's reply. Captain, I need you to move your remaining ships to minimum safe distance. What we're about to do will not be pleasant to watch. Before Vex High could ask what the Admiral meant, the human fleet began moving. Their ships accelerated at impossible rates, their engines burning with contained fury. The lead vessel, which identified itself as the UES Prometheus, was larger than any Krellian battleship, but moved with the grace of a predator stalking prey. The Krellian response was immediate. Admiral Vecchiver, commander of the Dominion fleet, had been preparing for the final bombardment of Zephyria Prime when the humans arrived. His species had conquered 17 different civilizations over the past century, and he had learned to recognize the signs of a defeated enemy. Unknown vessels, Vecchiver transmitted. You are interfering with Krellian territorial expansion. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. The human response was not what any of the aliens expected. Instead of negotiations or demands, Admiral Cross simply said, Krellian fleet, you are hereby designated as hostile combatants engaged in acts of genocide against non-combatant populations. Prepare to be destroyed. The battle began without ceremony. The humans opened fire first, their weapon systems unleashing energies that the Zephyrians had never seen before. Streams of accelerated particles tore through Krellian shields like they were made of paper, nuclear-tipped missiles, guided by artificial intelligence systems of terrifying sophistication, found their targets with mechanical precision. But it was the humans' tactics that truly shocked both sides. Instead of the formal fleet engagements that characterized most space warfare, the human ships fought like a pack of wolves. They used their superior speed and maneuverability to isolate individual Krellian vessels, concentrating overwhelming firepower on single targets before moving to the next. By the void, whispered Chief Engineer Murden, watching the tactical display. They're not just fighting a battle, they're conducting a systematic extermination. Within the first hour, 12 Krellian ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The humans had taken no casualties, their shields and armor proving superior to anything the Dominion could deploy. But more disturbing than their technological advantage was their apparent ruthlessness. They gave no quarter, accepted no surrenders, and showed no mercy to an enemy they had designated as genocidal. Captain Vex High realized with growing unease that while the humans might save his people, they had summoned something far more dangerous than the Krellians to their quiet corner of the galaxy. The Deathworld warrior Skolo Patricia Morgan felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as her assault shuttle approached the Krellian command ship. The massive vessel, its hull scarred by human weapons fire, drifted helplessly in space with its engines destroyed and shields down. Round it, the remains of the once mighty Dominion fleet painted abstract patterns of destruction against the star field. Remember, Morgan addressed her Marines over the tactical channel. Intelligence suggests the Krellians have been enslaving populations on conquered worlds. Our primary objective is to secure any prisoners and gather intelligence on their empires. Structure: Sergeant First Class David Chen, a veteran of the asteroid belt conflicts, checked his weapon systems one final time. Ma'am, what's the rules of engagement? The Zephyrians seem to think we're here as peacekeepers. Morgan smiled grimly behind her helmet visor. Sergeant, any Krellian found with a weapon is considered an active combatant. Any Krellian found harming prisoners is considered a war criminal. Any Krellian found trying to destroy evidence of their crimes is considered a high-value target. Clear enough. The boarding action was swift and brutal. Human Marines, equipped with powered armor and enhanced reaction times, moved through the Krellian ship like a force of nature. The Dominion soldiers, used to fighting lightly armed civilians, found themselves facing an enemy that had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Private Jessica Torres, breaching the ship's detention area, found rows of holding cells containing beings from a dozen different species. Colonel, you need to see this. They've been keeping a collection. Morgan arrived to find evidence of systematic atrocities stretching back decades. The Krellians hadn't just been conquering worlds, they had been harvesting entire populations for slave labor, scientific experimentation, and entertainment. The survivors told stories of worlds burned clean, species driven to extinction, and civilizations erased from galactic history. Get me Admiral Cross, Morgan ordered, her voice tight with controlled fury. The Admiral's face appeared on her helmet display, his expression grim as he reviewed the Marine reports. Patricia, what's the situation down there? It's worse than we thought, sir. The Krellians aren't just expansionists, they're systematic exterminators. We've found evidence of genocide against at least 30 different species. The Zephyrians were just their latest target. Cross was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Morgan could hear the bridge crew of the Prometheus coordinating with the other human vessels. As they finished hunting down the last Krellian ships, "Colonel, upload all evidence to Fleet Intelligence. This changes everything. Sir, we came here thinking we were stopping a local conflict. Instead, we've discovered an empire built on the systematic destruction of peaceful civilizations. The Krellian Dominion represents an existential threat to every thinking species in this galaxy." Back on the Zephyrian command ship, Captain Vex High was beginning to understand the true nature of the beings who had answered his distress call. The humans had not just defeated the Krellian fleet, they had annihilated it with a thoroughness that spoke of deep-seated fury at the crimes they had uncovered. "Captain," Communications Officer Yelmos called out, "Admiral Cross is requesting to speak with you directly." The human admiral appeared on the main screen, his face bearing the expression of someone who had seen too much evil and was prepared to do something about it. "Captain Vex High, my Marines have discovered evidence that makes it clear the Krellian threat extends far beyond your world. We're going to need your help." "Our help?" Vex High asked, confused. "Admiral, we are a peaceful people. We don't engage in warfare." "I'm not asking you to fight," Cross replied. "I'm asking you to survive. Because what we're about to do to the Krellian Dominion is going to reshape the balance of power in this galaxy. Every peaceful species is going to need to choose sides, and we'd rather have you as allies than as collateral damage." The human fleet began moving toward the edge of the system, their course set for the heart of Krellian space. Behind them, they left a world saved, but forever changed by the knowledge that somewhere among the stars, a species of warriors had decided that genocide was no longer acceptable. The birth of empire, the Krellian homeworld of Dominax, had never seen defeat. For 3 centuries, its crimson skies had watched fleets depart to conquer new territories, returning with slaves and tribute from dozens of subjugated worlds. The massive orbital defense platforms that ringed the planet had been built more for show than function. Who would dare attack the heart of the Dominion? Supreme Commander Krelithek stood in the war room of the Planetary Command Center, staring at reports that made no sense. In the past 18 months, 17 different Krellian fleets had simply vanished. No distress calls, no battle reports, no survivors, just silence where once there had been the organized expansion of his empire. "Supreme Commander," his aide nervously approached, "we've lost contact with the Outer Rim garrisons. All 12 fortress worlds have gone dark." Krelithek's clawed hands gripped the edge of the tactical display. The humans had moved through Krellian space like a plague, systematically destroying every military installation and liberating every slave world they found. But more disturbing than their military success was their apparent immunity to Krellian diplomacy. They had ignored every offer of negotiation, rejected every attempt at tribute, and responded to threats with overwhelming force. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the edge of the system. It's from the humans." The main screen activated, showing the face of Admiral James Cross. Behind him, the bridge of the UES Prometheus hummed with quiet efficiency. "Supreme Commander Krelithek, I am Admiral Cross of the Terran Empire. You are ordered to surrender unconditionally within 1 hour, or your world will be reduced to ash." Terran Empire. The humans had changed their designation somewhere in their campaign of conquest. Krelithek felt his survival instinct screaming warnings as he stared at the being who had destroyed his civilization. "Admiral, surely we can reach some accommodation. The Dominion has resources, technology, territory to trade." "The only thing the Krellian Dominion has that we want," Cross replied coldly, "is its complete and total extinction. You have 59 minutes." The transmission ended, leaving Krelithek staring at tactical displays showing the largest human fleet ever assembled. Over 200 vessels surrounded Dominax, their weapons trained on a world that had never known the touch of enemy fire. High above the planet, Colonel Morgan prepared her Marines for what would be the final battle of the Krellian War. The orbital platforms were heavily defended, but human engineers had spent months analyzing captured Krellian technology. They knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. "Remember," Morgan addressed her assault teams, This isn't just about destroying military targets. The Krellians have spent centuries perfecting the art of genocide. Every computer core, every database, every record of their crimes needs to be preserved. Future generations need to know what happens to species that choose extinction over coexistence. The battle for Dominax lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Krellian Dominion ceased to exist as a political entity. Their home world, stripped of its military capability but otherwise intact, became the first planet in what the humans now called the Terran Empire. Captain Vex High stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran embassy on Zephyria Prime, watching human construction crews work alongside Zephyrian engineers to rebuild the damaged cities. The past 2 years had brought changes he could never have imagined. Captain, Admiral Cross approached, wearing the dress uniform of the Terran Empire rather than the military fatigues of the old Earth Defense Force. I wanted to personally thank you for your cooperation during the integration process. Integration. That was the polite term for what had happened to dozens of former Krellian slave worlds. The humans had liberated them, certainly, but liberation had come with conditions. Join the Terran Empire, accept human protection, contribute to the collective defense of all member worlds. Admiral Vex High said carefully, "My people appreciate everything humanity has done for us, but we wonder sometimes if we've simply traded one form of control for another." Cross smiled, but there was steel in his eyes. "Captain, the Krellians would have exterminated your entire species for the crime of existing. We're asking you to help us make sure that never happens to anyone else. The choice is yours, but the consequences of that choice affect everyone." Through the embassy windows, they could see human ships patrolling the system, their weapons ready to defend against threats that might come from the unknown depths of space. The galaxy had learned a new lesson in the past 2 years. There were species out there, willing to fight extinction with extinction, and the balance of power had shifted permanently in favor of those who called themselves human. The Terran Empire had been born from a single act of compassion answering a desperate call for help. But what it had become was something far more complex, a galactic order built on the principle that some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant becoming the very thing that others feared most. In the end, the Zephyrians had asked for allies. Instead, they had awakened something that would reshape the galaxy forever. The age of peaceful expansion was over, the age of the death world. Warriors had begun,